Osman returned to Constantinople after his self-proclaimed victory in Hoten and ordered celebrations to be held in the city to honor his victory. The celebrations even included a reenactment of the battle with live ammunition. During the reenactment, a spray bullet hit Osman's infant son, Prince Ömer, and killed him. Thus, the story of Hoten War ended after ruining Osman's reputation, killing tens of thousands, and taking Osman's one and only son. Before we get to the video, please subscribe. We are very close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, which will allow us to monetize our content. Leave a like and enjoy. War of Hoten was a major wake-up call for Osman. He started viewing the janissaries as an ineffective and disobedient force, a threat. Osman hated the janissaries for all the wrong reasons though. He viewed them as incapable, even though they were only matched by the elite units of European armies. Osman hated them for being disobedient, yet it was mainly his own fault for mismanaging the situation at every opportunity he had. He had cut their wages, insulted them, and executed their officers when he had much wiser options. The undesirable outcome at Hoten was mostly the result of Osman's inexperience as a 17-year-old commander. Yet, in hindsight, he appears to have right points. Many of janissary's infamous traits were not as apparent back then. No sultan was dethroned, and janissaries were not despotically involved in politics. They were still an effective fighting force, but the cracks were showing. Janissaries were slowly becoming more and more corrupt, and in the following decades, the janissaries were going to plague the Ottoman politics. As mentioned in the previous episode, ghost soldiers was a major issue. Janissary officers would report inflated numbers of troops in their regiments and collect their paychecks. Traditionally, janissaries were banned from being engaged in any other job than being a soldier, but by Osman's time, many of the janissaries had their own businesses, and they did not play a fair game either. Janissary merchants would harass civilian businesses and even extract money from them. Gangs run by janissaries ran brothels and were infamous of raping young boys. Janissary fire brigades started fires and then either demanded huge amounts of money or robbed the houses they set on fire. This widespread corruption made janissaries a time bomb, ticking, waiting for a cataclysm. 17-year-old Osman wanted to replace the janissaries with Sekban regiments. Sekban were another backbone of the Ottoman army at the time. The larger scale wars of 17th century had increased the need for soldiers, and this need was satisfied by mercenaries hired among the peasants. These peasants would be paid only in war times and would be left unemployed at peace. Sekban infantry may look similar to janissaries at first, as they were also musket infantry, but they lacked any discipline and loyalty. They constantly rebelled at times of peace and were notorious of changing sides for the highest bidder. Osman probably thought that what the Sekban lacked in training and loyalty, they would compensate in numbers. Osman knew he could not take on the janissaries alone. He needed help from the clergy, yet he did not have the best relationship with the imams neither. Especially Sheikhul Islam Assad, the head of the clergy, was a self-made political rival now. Osman held grudges against Assad since his coronation, as Assad had played the role of the kingmaker and thrown Osman's mentally unstable uncle before. At the end, Assad saw his mistake and thrown Osman shortly afterwards, but Osman's grudge did not end there. The young Sultan started his reign with scolding Assad publicly and then did everything in his power to get rid of him. The Ottoman laws did not allow him to sack Sheikhul Islam, as Sheikhul Islams were seen as the highest religious authority and legally even above the Sultan. And now he was stuck with a senseless rivalry. which no sultan before or after him had to deal with. But see, Osman had an idea to solve all his problems with Asad himself and the clergy. Asad had a young and beautiful daughter named Akile. If Osman married Akile, he would have an alliance with Asad through marriage, and through Asad, he would have an alliance with the clergy. Osman also had another objective in this marriage. He was not only planning to reform the army, his plans were much more grander. He wanted to get rid of everything. He wanted to change the clothes to make them simpler and more practical. It is said that Osman even had plans of moving the capital to Anatolia. And of course, he wished to disband the Harem system. Ottoman Harem was a complicated and integral part of the Ottoman bureaucracy. If you wish to learn more about it, check our video on Ottoman Harem. But in short, Harem customs dictated strict policies on sultans to ensure the survival of the dynasty. The sultans were not allowed to marry free Muslim women, but only slaves. Thus, Osman wanted to start disbanding the harem by marrying Asad's daughter, Akile. To Osman's dismay, Asad hated this idea. Asad thought that this was a major breach of harem customs, which were put in place with good reason, to limit the bride's family's influence in state affairs. A slave queen with no family was a woman only loyal to her husband and son. But a noble woman had many responsibilities to her family. Moreover, although marrying a sultan was a great honor, a marriage meant that Akile, a Turkish noble woman, had to live among slaves and concubines, which was seen as an insult. Although Asad cited these reasons to refuse Osman's proposal, at this point he probably had no love for Osman. But one does not reject the sultan. Try as Asad may, Osman was the sultan, and at the end he forced Akile to marry him. Osman and Akile got married under threats, and unsurprisingly it did not result in the loving marriage life Osman had hoped. Akile Sultan refused to join Osman in the palace, as the Imperial Harem was a place for slaves. And Akile, as a free Turkish woman, was not going to degrade herself and live among them. This marriage, just like Osman's all other attempts at reconciliation, did nothing but to drive the wedge further between him and the clergy. Yet Osman did not care. We can't be sure why he acted so carelessly. Maybe it was his confidence in his position, because no sultan before him was dethroned. Or maybe it was his trust in his capabilities. Regardless, Osman did not care what his subjects thought, and just proceeded to the next phase of his plan. He wanted to get rid of the janissaries, but how? They were the only military force in the capital, and they certainly were not going to just stand down and go home just because Osman said so. He had to find a way to get away from Constantinople. And a way he did find. He was going to go on pilgrimage to Arabia. But this was in fact an elaborate plot. Osman was going to use this excuse to get to Egypt, muster his army, and then march on Constantinople to eradicate the janissaries. Thank you for watching our video. If you got this far, please subscribe and leave a like. We will see you in the next and final episode on Osman.